Hi and welcome to my 2025 writing goals. It's almost the end of January and I feel like this is a bit too late for posting a goals video, but honestly the reason I haven't made this video earlier is that I've been working with my goals, so that's a good thing. But I still wanted to tell you where I am in my writing process and what my plans are going forward. Let's start with 2024 recap. I write my writing goals in my reading journal, and in 2024 I had 4 goals. I wanted to read the third draft of Project Prehistory, I wanted to write and revise the fourth draft of Project Prehistory, I wanted to revise 1 or 2 short stories, and I wanted to publish 1 or 2 short stories. Project Prehistory is my current work in progress that I've been working on since 2017. It's a coming-of-age story set in a prehistoric matriarchal society. I wrote the first draft in 2017. I took a couple of years break to work on something else. Then I came back to Project Prehistory and wrote the second draft in 2020 and 2021. Took another break to self-publish Katie, my Northanger Abbey retelling, and then came back to Project Prehistory in late 2022 to start working on the third draft. I finished the third draft in 2023 and last year I worked on the fourth draft. So what I do after I finish a draft is I let it rest for a couple of months, print it out and read the manuscript 3 times. I find that this is really helpful for me because with every read through I find more and more things to fix. And after the third draft, I still had a lot of things that I needed to fix. I got beta reader feedback on my third draft and I needed to implement that. I also had a paid beta reader. She gave me a lot of feedback, so she acted almost as my developmental editor. There were 2 major issues with draft 3. First, the manuscript was way too long. It was 158,000 words. And since I'm trying to get this book traditionally published, that's way too long for a debut novel. The second problem was that my second main character didn't have clear enough goal and stakes. So my beta readers gave me a lot of feedback and ideas on how to make the story better. And that was especially true with my paid beta reader who acted as my developmental editor. I didn't always agree with her suggestions, but if she pointed something out to me, I knew there was a problem and I needed to fix it, even if I didn't always end up doing it the way that she suggested. So her feedback definitely helped me make this story stronger. She does developmental editing now, so I'll leave a link to her website in the description if you're looking for a developmental editor. Anyway, I spent the first 2.5 months of 2024 reading the third draft and figuring out all of the things I needed to change. There were a few occasions, especially in the first third of the novel, where I needed to delete scenes, change the order of scenes, and just add motivation and stakes. So the reading process and figuring out all of the edits I needed to make took me quite a long time. But then I was ready to start the editing process and I wrote the fourth draft. That took me from mid-March to early October, so around 6.5 months. Considering how long this book is and how much I needed to change, it wasn't too bad. I managed to cut around 20,000 words, so my manuscript now has around 138,000 words in total. It's unfortunately still a bit too long for a debut novel, but I don't think I'll be able to get the word count down, at least not significantly. But once I start the querying process, we'll see what the agents have to say. So that was my first 2 goals done. The second 2 goals were about short stories. I revised, as I had hoped, 2 short stories and I self-published 1 in August. In the Shadow of Death is an urban fantasy short story about love and loss, and it's available on Amazon if you're looking for a short emotional read. I didn't publish a second short story last year, but as my goal said, publishing 1 or 2 short stories, I'm counting that goal as accomplished. Instead of publishing the second short story, I actually wrote an entirely new novel. If you followed my November Writing Challenge videos, you'll know that in October and November I outlined and wrote a modern retelling of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. That was a really fun side project to embark on while I let Project Prehistory rest. In November I didn't do any actual writing, but I did read 2 writing guides. June Casagrande's It Was the Best of Sentences, It Was the Worst of Sentences is a very funny grammar guide, and Louis Hornby's Editing Fiction at Sentence Level is a very detailed guide to line editing. I was hoping that these would help me prepare for the line edits of Draft 5 of Project Prehistory, and they did not disappoint. I have slightly longer reviews of these books in my December reading wrap-up video, but I highly recommend both of these books. And that takes us to 2025 and my reading goals for this year. This year I want to read Draft 4 of Project Prehistory, write and revise Draft 5, prepare for querying, publish 1 short story, and as a stretch goal possibly write Draft 1.2 of my Pride and Prejudice retelling. So let's talk a little more about my goals and where I'm currently at. Like I said, before I start the editing process, I read the previous draft 3 times. Usually I just print out the manuscript on A4, but this time I decided to print it in a book form because, believe it or not, this was actually cheaper than printing it out, and I had to order this from the German Amazon. I live in Finland, and that's the closest place where you can get Amazon proof copies. But I was ordering author copies of my reading journals, so I thought, hey, why not get this as well since I'm already paying for the shipping. Anyway, I started the year by reading this, and I'm actually still in the middle of the process. The first read of the 3 is supposed to be a fast read, although I'm by no means a fast reader. I started the first fast read on Thursday, January 2nd, and I ended it on Tuesday, January 7th, so it took me 6 days. In any case, during the fast read, I'm trying not to make any notes on the margins, unless it's something that I know I'll easily miss in subsequent reads. So yes, I will fix spelling mistakes and typos the moment I see them. Because if I don't, I can't guarantee I'll ever will. The other thing I note is the use of wrong personal pronoun. My native language doesn't have gendered personal pronouns, so I'll easily mix up he and she, especially if it's something like her mother when it should be his mother, because mother is a woman, so my mind tells me that the pronoun should be feminine as well. Anyway, those will easily slip through if I don't correct them the moment I notice them. And another thing that I will always correct is the use of wrong character name. Fun story, Katie almost went to print with 1 instance of the main character's name spelled wrong. I'm glad I noticed it a month before the publication because my editor didn't notice it, and I must have read the book at least 50 times and I never noticed it either. Anyway, moral of the story, if there is a mistake, I will fix it now. Even if I later decide to change or even delete the sentence, because if I don't fix it now, there is a chance that I might never notice it again. After the first read with as few comments as possible, I read the book a second time. That took me a week and a half, and I finished the second read last week. The first fast read will give me a big picture idea of all the things that need to be changed, and at this point I don't need to make any major changes. The story, the plot, the character arcs, they're as good as I can make them. So at this point I'm focusing on line edits. Since I deleted so much from the text in the previous draft, there are a few cases where I need to add something back to make the text clearer, but mostly I just need to polish the prose. And this is where the 2 writing guides I mentioned earlier really came in handy. I've noticed that I have a lot of sentences where I use words like when, while, before, and after. Louise Hornby's book has a chapter on why clauses starting with after and before are problematic. That's because they focus on the order of the events instead of the action itself. So I'm trying to be mindful of that and delete the unnecessary focus on the order of the events. There are also a few other words and expressions I notice I'm overusing, such as eyebrows and shoulders and people slumping all over the place. So I need to change or delete some of those instances. Anyway, I'm now on my third read-through of the manuscript. This time I'm trying to pay even closer attention to all the things I noticed on my first and second read-throughs. So I can be sure that I will notice all the things that slipped through the cracks in my previous read-through. I find it really helpful to read the text 3 times. It gives me a great blueprint to start working on the edits. 2 times would be too few because there would still be things I would miss, and I think 4 times is too many. But 3 seems to be the optimal number. In January, I also read The Power by Naomi Alderman. I read this hoping that it could be a comp title for Project Prehistory because they both take place in a world where the women are in charge, even though my book isn't a dystopian. Unfortunately, I didn't realize earlier that this book was published already in 2016, which means that it's too old to be a comp title. It doesn't really matter because I have other ideas for comp titles and this was a great book. I'll talk more about this book in my January reading wrap-up, but I already have a review up in my blog, so I'll leave a link to that in the description. But in short, I highly recommend this book. So currently I'm reading Project Prehistory for the 3rd time. I hope to be done by February 2nd and then I can start writing my handwritten notes into a Word document. I have a lot of notes, so that might take me a couple of weeks even, but I should be able to start the edits in mid-February. I have no idea how long the edits will take because this book always seems to take longer than I expect. But if I edit 2 chapters a week, I should be done by the end of July. It would be fun if I was done earlier, but end of July is fine, I'm okay with that. It will give me plenty of time for the next step in the process, which is prepare for querying. That's scary, I'm not gonna lie. I need to learn more about querying process. I obviously know something about the process already, but I need to sit down and do some serious learning. I also need to get all the necessary documents in order. So I need to write a query letter and I need to update my synopsis that I wrote a couple of years back. And I need to polish the first chapters, although that's part of the editing process. I also want to get professional feedback on my query package before I send it to agents. So I'm hoping to do all of that this year and start querying next year. That should give me plenty of time to get everything in order. I do not want to rush this process. So those are my goals for Project Prehistory. I also want to publish 1 short story. Last year I self-published a short story, but this year I'm thinking of sending one to a publication. I've never done that before and I don't know how long that process will take, so I'm not 100% sure if I can actually publish a short story this year, but I'm going to try. I know with scholarly articles it may sometimes take several years to get an article published, but I don't know how short story publication works, so that's something I also need to look into. But at the very least I want to send out 1 short story and hopefully someone will say, yeah, we like this and we'll publish it. But since it's not self-published, the publication process is not in my hands and not something I can control. But it would be fun to try. And finally, my stretch goal. If I finish Project Prehistory by the end of July and have my query package ready at around the same time, I might have time to get back to my Pride and Prejudice retelling. Now I did write the story from start to finish in November, but there are so many things in the story that I know I need to change and add and possibly also delete that I'm not calling that draft done. I actually haven't even read what I wrote in November, so there might be a lot more things that I need to fix than I'm even aware of. So I'm hoping that later this year I have time to read that draft and start making some of the changes. If I don't have time to finish it, it's not a big deal, but it would be nice to at least start the process so I have something to work on while I query Project Prehistory in 2026. Anyway, big things are happening this year and even bigger next year. I've already started to make great headway with my goals, and I hope that the positive momentum will continue. Let me know in the comments what your writing goals this year are, and I'll see you in my next video.